To Russia now, where President Vladimir Putin has announced the deployment of new hypersonic cruise missiles. He says a frigate armed with the weapons is now on its way to the Atlantic in a show of force. Russia, China and the United States have been in a race to develop hypersonic weapons, highly desirable because of their speed and maneuverability.
Via video link, Russian President Vladimir Putin joined a sending-off ceremony for a new frigate equipped with missiles. But the celebration looks like a distraction tactic. After Russian troops suffered heavy losses in Kherson and Makiivka, criticism of the military's leadership is mounting. Moscow says 89 Russian soldiers were killed in Makiivka, dozens more than the death toll it initially announced. It's thought the men were killed in the school building where they were staying, in part of a Russian-controlled area of eastern Ukraine. Military officials say the soldiers themselves were partly to blame.
A commission is working to investigate the circumstances of the incident. But it's already obvious that the main reason for what happened was the switching on and massive use, contrary to the ban, of mobile phones by the troops who were in the zone of enemy weapons. This allowed the enemy to locate the troops for a missile strike.
Like here in Samara on Tuesday, people around Russia are mourning the dead. Investigations by the military's commission are ongoing. Meanwhile, some politicians and military commentators are venting their anger at the Russian military leadership on the online service Telegram and calling for revenge. Deputy Duma Speaker Andrei Medvedev says housing troops in buildings rather than bunkers is akin to helping the enemy. And while Russia steps up its attacks on Ukraine's civilian infrastructure, it plans to protect itself with a new hypersonic missile system.
I am sure that such powerful weapons will make it possible to reliably protect Russia from potential external threats.
With that, Putin sent off the new frigate and its hypersonic cruise missiles, for now on a training mission.
And DW correspondent Yuri Reshetto joins me from Riga. Yuri, there's a lot of criticism of the military in Russia itself. Who are the critics and what are they saying exactly?
Well, look, the larger the disaster, the greater the criticism. What happened in New Year's Day is not only has a huge dimension for the Russian army, but also for Russian society. Reportedly, the victims were mainly mobilized soldiers. Those are soldiers who obviously didn't go to war voluntarily. Ultimately, their loved ones might be very angry now, and because there were so many casualties, even the tight-lipped Ministry of Defense can't cover up the problem. So Russian war reporters, but also backbenchers, political backbenchers, are criticizing the military for the fact that several hundred soldiers were gathered in one place and they became easy prey for a mass attack. On top of that, these soldiers were allegedly living on an ammunition dump, which may have caused a huge explosion. The Ministry of Defense, on the other hand, has fired back, blaming the soldiers for using their cell phones when they were not allowed to do so. All this sounds like finger-pointing and blame-shifting.
It is very unusual for the Russian military to be publicly criticized. It is becoming more frequent, though, in recent weeks and months. Why is it being allowed now in this fashion?
Well, it's important from what direction the criticism is coming from, Nicole, because even the slightest criticism of the Russian military is extremely dangerous, and this can be viewed as discrediting the Russian armed forces, a crime which can be punished by many years in prison. And there are cases in Russia where people have had to go to jail because of their anti-war stance. But this fate only seems to threaten those who are questioning the so-called special military operation, as the war is called in Russia, and who are attacking the general course of the Kremlin. Other patriotic bloggers or politicians are apparently allowed to criticize how the military is fighting the war without actually attacking Putin's general line and, importantly, without personally attacking the Russian president. That's the main or the key difference.
So without attacking Putin and his line specifically, what's the political dimension then in all of this? Can this criticism change Putin's strategy in the war, or is he not affected by it, basically?
I don't think that this criticism is really dangerous for Vladimir Putin at the moment. As I said, there is a little criticism of him personally, nor of his general course. What could happen is that some high-ranking military officials are exchanged again. We've seen that happen many times already. It's unclear whether Defense Minister Shoigu will be dismissed, but he is considered Putin's closest friend. And there have been photos of the two spending vacations together in the past. And what Putin is definitely not doing is dismissing Shoigu now at the height of this scandal. If anything, that could happen later, when the topic is a little less hot.
DW's Yuri Roshetto, thank you so much. And we can now speak to defense expert Marina Miron for more. Dr. Miron, welcome back to the day. So Russia's military command has come under fire after this attack. They had to acknowledge the losses, but are fairly reluctant to take the blame. Who's responsible here?
Well, it's very difficult to determine who is responsible because obviously the military command is trying to shift the blame to the soldiers, saying that they have been using mobile phones and therefore gave away their location. I think the blame could also be on the military intelligence, not warning the soldiers not to be in that building, and counterintelligence basically knowing that the Ukrainian side knows these locations. And I think it wasn't very difficult to predict that the Ukrainians might be able to strike those locations because they are within their range, knowing that the Ukrainian side has HIMARS. So I think there are obviously planning mistakes, and it could be down to human error as well, giving away the location. It has been a problem for both the Russians and the Ukrainians at the very beginning, that they were using their own mobile phones on the battlefield. And then, you could look at the pictures and geolocate them, and then that would give away their positions. However, that being said, the numbers that the Ministry of Defense officially announced have been obviously underestimated, just, to prevent the public from creating a panic inside the country, because after the partial mobilization, which wasn't very welcome amongst the population in Russia, giving away the numbers and admitting the mistake would be, again, something that would probably harm Putin's and the military command's image in the eyes of the population.
Yeah, you call it a panic that they're trying to keep at bay there. What would the effects of such a panic be for this so-called special military operation?
Well, Russia has already, for many years, been afraid of internal unrests, or let's say internal unrests which are sponsored by the so-called collective West. And so they want to make sure to keep everything under wraps, how many soldiers have died and so on and so forth. And even if they have military setbacks, they're kind of the official MOD spokesman, General Konashenkov, he's kind of trying to conceal the truth and depict it in a very, very positive way, so that there is no reason for people to go on the streets. Obviously, Russia, as a securitarized state, has all the means to control those kinds of situations, and they've been trying to kind of use their intelligence services to try to find out whether there are any opponents to the regime and so on. However, it's still difficult because Russia is so big, and to control everything is very difficult. So it's important for Putin not to lose his ratings and to remain in power. Therefore, it's crucial to be able to control the flow of information and whatever people are seeing on their TV screens. And we had a similar situation in Syria, where Russia proclaimed victory 3 times despite its military setbacks at the very beginning of the Syrian operation.
Now, Putin is also trying to divert attention from this disaster by sending a new generation of hypersonic cruise missiles to the Atlantic. What can you tell us about the Zircon system?
Well, the Zircon system, as you have already said, those are new hypersonic missiles that Russia has been testing for several years. And the interesting thing about them is them having hypersonic speeds, therefore speed of Mach 9, which is obviously around 3 kilometers per second, which is obviously much more than a simple cruise missile. In addition to that, they have a heavy 400 kilograms warhead. And the thing with those, obviously you can mount nuclear warheads on those missiles, the same with the likes of Kalibr missiles. However, the interesting thing is their trajectory, which is different from, let's say, a ballistic missile. And therefore, they are very difficult to intercept. And it has been a growing threat, generally speaking, the proliferation of hypersonic missiles, because there are no defenses. Because when hypersonic missiles, when they fly, they create a plasma cloud which consumes radio waves. So basically, you cannot detect them in advance and you cannot react to shoot them down. That's why they are so lethal. And Russia is one of the countries that is developing hypersonic missiles. The US right now is testing some of its own, but it is true what Putin says, that basically there is no comparison at this stage, perhaps China. However, from the Western countries, we're still lagging behind in this domain. So It is very disconcerting when Putin is sending those hypersonic missiles all the way to the Mediterranean.
Exactly. And what is his intention there? Is this just intimidation tactics? Is he just taking them on a tour to show them off? Is he planning on using them in the war? And how could they be used in the war?
I think one of the reasons he's doing it now, obviously, it's a way to divert attention from Ukraine and to remind everybody how mighty Russia is. It's also designed for the domestic audience to show that Russia is capable and Russia has weapons that nobody else has. And again, those missiles will be in the Mediterranean, and Russia has been interested in projecting power in the Mediterranean because it has a naval base in Syria, in Tartus, and so I assume that's where Russian fleet is heading in order to be able to cover that part of the Mediterranean, which has already got air defense systems, Russian air defense systems in place, which kind of limits NATO in terms of how they operate in and over the Mediterranean. And obviously the proximity and given the range of those hypersonic missiles, it is a direct message to the Western allies, basically to show that Russia has the capability to reach them. And they have absolutely no defense.
That was defense expert Marina Miron. Thank you so much for your time and all those very interesting insights.
Thank you.